She prayed that an angel from the heavenly kingdom would answer her, but she received a response from a dark entity whom she swore to serve for all eternity. Years later, they were living in Germany in 1838. Thomas, her husband, had to go to work. When he arrived at the buffet, he was asked about his arrival time. Thomas apologized, and his boss told him that he would increase his salary due to his new commitment to his beautiful wife. But he has a job for him. A count wants to retire to the oldest mansion. The count cannot travel, so Thomas must go and find him. The name of that mysterious count is Orlok, and he lives in the middle of nowhere. Thomas will be away for 6 weeks, but his wife has had dreams and illusions about their wedding and is completely against Thomas leaving. That day she was at the altar, her husband was not there. The guests were all dead, and she was holding the hand of death. The most disturbing thing was that she was completely happy next to the Grim Reaper. Ellen will stay at the home of her loyal friend Friedrich, who is a millionaire with 2 daughters and an elegant wife. Ellen says she no longer has delusions and has forgotten her difficult past, although no one knows what awaits her on her long adventure. Finally, he sets off on his journey. Ellen gives her husband a necklace containing salt and a lock of her hair, but that day she feels a sense of nostalgia, knowing that she will not be by Thomas's side for 6 weeks. That brave man travels a long way and finally arrives at a desolate village full of dirty, but very cheerful gypsies. Upon arriving, Thomas looks for lodging since he has an audience at Orlok Castle. They ask him never to mention that name again and to leave the place, but Thomas has money with him and convinces the villagers to take him in at their dirty hotel. At night, an old woman warns him to beware of the man who lived in that castle, to beware of his shadow, which would trap him, and to never, ever stop praying. At dawn, noise disturbed the streets of the village. It was gypsies praying as they accompanied a naked virgin on horseback, led by the man who had mocked Thomas. On that road, a vampire was seen and sent his death with a stake through his chest, but that event would remain only in Thomas's mind, for it is not known whether it was a dream or reality. The next morning he leaves. There is absolutely no one in the village, and his horse has disappeared. He walks along a long road and climbs mountains as if he were a great athlete, but finally he reaches a road that leads him to his destination. Some horses pull a carriage from that era and cloud his vision, although that carriage was only there to pick him up, as if they knew Thomas was in that place. The door magically opens by itself, but at the end of that road, a dark and gloomy man was waiting for him, who invites him to follow him. It is already past midnight, and the Count asks him to show him the contract for his new mansion. Before doing so, he asks him to address the Count as his bloodline deserves and to call him my lord. He offers him something to drink, but the conversation and the fear Thomas feels become increasingly intense. Thomas asks about the nomads in the area, but the Count despises them for their beliefs and fairy tales. Thomas asks about the kind of rituals the gypsies perform, and the Count becomes angry and asks him never to ask about it again. He simply wants to retire as soon as possible and move to the new city. When Thomas began to eat, he accidentally cut his finger, and the spilled blood caused the man to drool from his mouth. The Count asked to help Thomas because he could see how bad he was feeling. Thomas was so scared that just seeing the man's presence made the terror he felt disappear. While Thomas has been staying at Orlok's castle, he has developed bite marks on his chest, although because of what happened with the nomads, he suspects it may be the Count. After a long time, the Count deigned to seal the contract. All that was missing was Thomas's signature. The contract was in the language of the Count's ancestors. Thomas carries a memento of Ellen with him, and when Orlok takes the necklace in his own hands, he can smell the hair that Ellen put there. Perhaps the destiny between Ellen and the Count goes beyond mere superstition. Although the journey will not be free, it will be expensive for Thomas, and even if he wants to escape, he must listen to the Count's advice and leave that place until he feels better. The next morning, Thomas tries to escape from the castle, but the doors are completely locked. Finally, he finds one that he manages to force open. Upon entering, he realizes that the place is a morgue filled with cement tombs. At the end, there is one tomb that is different from the rest. Thomas opens it and realizes that the Count is nothing more than a fucking vampire who lives among rats and hides from the sun. However, it is now that the man decides to try to kill him and finally escape from that dark place. But just as he was about to achieve his goal, the Count gets up and goes after Thomas, and that is how Thomas runs away from that evil vampire. Ellen's husband's life is more than lost, and as the cold night falls over the castle, Thomas is condemned. The vampire squeezes his blood until he can no longer, but Thomas sees the Count's face as if his wife were the vampire. Perhaps Ellen's trivial dreams, which Thomas had suppressed, finally came true. On the other hand, the family of the wealthy Friedrich is tired of caring for a crazy woman who has constant nervous breakdowns. Despite being treated by several doctors, she keeps repeating the same phrase, "He's coming, he's coming." In addition, Thomas's boss, Knock, has been admitted to the hospital for eating several raw sheep. The bosses there try to talk to him, but it is impossible to deal with a madman, and just as they were talking, he ate a live pigeon, yet he repeats the same words that Ellen repeats, "He's coming, he's coming." Everything indicates that the Count chose Knock to serve him his perfect victim on a platter. But this is when everyone asks themselves, where the hell is Thomas? Thomas is currently wandering around in madness, wanting to save Ellen, but it's too late for that. Orlok is already on his way, while her friend Friedrich is searching for a famous French doctor who might have the cure for Ellen. There is something hidden behind the doctor. He was expelled from university a long time ago, and his hobbies now are alchemy, the occult, and dark philosophy. When the doctor visited Ellen, she recounted how she had suffered from these delusions in the past. She already knew when her parents would die. She knew many things. Her father often found her lost in the forest like a wandering elf. However, one day he found her naked on the ground, and her father thought of only one word, sin. All of this ended when Ellen met Thomas, but since then the nightmares have returned, this time much stronger. That night, the doctor managed to put Ellen into a trance. It took only a minute for Ellen to be transported to a realm that even humans cannot comprehend. With the power of a talisman, the doctor managed to get Ellen to react, but with the power and help of sacred names, he was finally able to make the evil entity speak. That entity's only goal, as stated by itself, is for Ellen to be its fiancé, perhaps because of the pact they made that day, when Ellen happily swore allegiance to it for all eternity. Because of this, the doctor must consult his oldest knowledge in his most precious books. But finally, Count Orlok crossed the high seas and arrived in the city where Ellen was. Both Thomas's fraudulent boss and Ellen sensed his arrival, but he brought with him more than just his vibe. He brought a plague of rats that Friedrich had to deal with. But the Count explains that he simply cannot kidnap Ellen, no matter how much he wants to be with her, because the contract stipulates that she must reaffirm her vows voluntarily and not out of obligation. As the days go by, the plague spreads throughout the city. While investigating its origin, they realize that the plague comes from an evil that stalks human life, an evil that would have sent Isaac Newton back to his mother's womb, the bringer of death, NOSFERATU. For centuries, that Count remained asleep like an unpleasant beast until Ellen awakened him. That vampire Orlok cannot love. His only instinct is to quench his thirst, and his only dwelling in this world is his appetite. But Ellen, by her own free will, must choose. She will only have 3 nights to choose her fate, and the first one has already passed. The tortures that the Count inflicts are not pleasant for anyone to witness. Ellen will have the courage to choose whether to continue with her human life or make the unpleasant decision to submit to Orlok. Even though Friedrich's wife was bitten by Orlok, he still doesn't believe in medieval superstitions, so he made Thomas and Ellen return to their home. Ellen confesses that she has known about this event for a long time. Every night she dreamed of the same demon, the same shadow. It was a sin she couldn't share with anyone. Only with Thomas could she feel the pleasure of living a normal life again. Thomas forgot to send Ellen letters every day. Orlok told her everything, how Thomas knelt before the Count, and how he fell into his arms like a little princess. He forgot Ellen's love and sold her for mere gold coins. However, there is something Thomas cannot do. He will never be able to satisfy the sorceress, as that ancient Count satisfies her. After the death of Friedrich's wife and daughters, he finally comes to believe in the beliefs, and that is how the whole group begins to plot against NOSFERATU. They must bless the mansion where the Count resides and pierce his chest with a stake. but there can be no mistakes. All of this is just a charade to buy time, because the only one capable of saving the world is Ellen. In ancient times, she would have been a high priestess. In these modern times, she is the salvation of humanity. When the operation was about to begin, Franz, Cyber, and Thomas found the bodies of Friedrich and his family in the chapel. They had to bless and burn them, but the plan continued to the letter. The third night was today. Ellen and Orlok knew it. When they arrived at the mansion, Thomas and the others realized that the Count was no longer there. The one who was there was the king of blasphemy, Knock. Although Thomas tries to run to save his wife, it is impossible because her fate is already sealed, and she decided it that way. When the pure light of dawn touches the ground, everyone will be redeemed thanks to Ellen. The midnight kiss between the beast and the human united them in a romance of a single being, an endless battle like Jacob and the angel, but this time with the goal of uniting through love and loyalty. When the light of dawn touched the degraded skin of that demon, there was no escape. Pure and fine nature took care of ending the curse, thanks to Ellen. Every ending must have balance. Ellen, in the process of redemption, also passed away and joined the one to whom she swore allegiance for all eternity. A man's lust caused carnage and plagues throughout the city, all to satisfy a woman. However, it was that woman's ovaries that put an end to endless abnormal events and restored the balance of natural human life.